What's up, Warhammer fans? So I just finished reading The First Heretic, which is the 15th book in the Horus Heresy novels. And I gotta say, this book is bitchin'. And I use that word lightly. I don't really just throw that word around for good books, but like this book was cool. I think it was definitely a more straightforward read than the Thousand Sons book, which says a lot because, Thousand Sons book was good too. And, it had a very signifying moment in the overall story. But this book definitely, in my opinion, was an easier read. There was a lot of moments that didn't have confusing giant words, because I do think that was something that Thousand Sons book had a lot of, because they have a lot of Egyptian names. And so there's just a lot of, it's just a little difficult for me. So, moving forward, why did I think The First Heretic was such a good book? Well, it had a pretty pivotal moment that happens in the overall story of the Horus Heresy, and it actually showed, again, another perspective of a pivotal moment in the Horus Heresy, in the overall Civil War. And I think a lot of these books moving forward, I think the first 20 books show you the same battle, maybe the same 5 battles it could be, but the same 5 battles from the perspective of the different sides. And so every different legion will get a perspective part in the novels. And so it does start to feel a little repetitive, but I will say overall this one offered a fresh, unique take and opened up a new storyline that I obviously know is going to be in the next books, which is pretty cool. And to me, I thought it was a really good book. I'm going to try to avoid getting into spoiler territory until later on in the video. So if you guys just want to watch the first half of this, I will be, of course, giving you an announcement when I say, hey, if you don't want to hear about, how the book ends and you want to read it yourself, I definitely recommend you do that because it really is super good. And you definitely should try to get these books. I do want to give some tips on where I get my books. I buy all of my Horus Heresy novels from thriftbooks.com. They do not sponsor me, but I do love buying the books from there. You can get them for a cheap price for the actual cost, which is $10. However, I will say book 16, which I believe is the next one I'm going to read, which is Prospero Burns. And some of the other books are that are harder to find and harder to get in print are substantially more expensive. And thrift books may not have them in stock. And they have a disclaimer on their website that will say they only get one per month, because those books aren't in publication anymore. So they are going to be triple the price. I just spent $73 on Prospero Burns. If you don't want to do that because you're not crazy like me, you can always get the ebook version for $5. I'm just actually trying to collect all the novels and just have them on display in my house. And of course, I'm also trying to read them. But moving forward, let me tell you what this book does very well and what this book does not do very well. It does one thing very well, which is it offers the paradox of what it is to be a traitor, but still feel and watch through their perspective how their legion is failing. How they're watching the decline of their brothers, how they're watching their Primarch just go insane, and those questioning thoughts of is this the right thing we're doing? And then kind of realizing, oh man, we messed up, but we've already gone too far. I loved that, and I think this author, which is Aaron Dembinski-Bowden, I don't really remember if he's written in the other books, but I was really surprised because honestly, I really only know Dan Abnett's name as one of the best writers for Warhammer, the novels, but I thought this book was great. It does a really good job of not overwhelming the reader with an insane amount of description when it comes to just explaining how a ship looks or the atmosphere. It does a good amount of giving you a good setting, good detail, but it's not so much where you're reading 5 pages of it, which I have to say Thousand Sons had some of that, and that was kind of oh my god, make it end. It really just feels after a certain point you're oh, just please. I feel you're just trying to fill pages at this point. Now, what this book does not do very well, in my opinion, is keep a linear timeline, because there are moments where I do feel this book tries to fit a lot of things in, and it kind of just does this I think it has 2 or 3 moments where it does large time jumps, and then of course it does pivot the story away from the main character for like a moment, and it kind of goes into a subplot for a little bit. I for one, I don't love all of the subplots that have been in these books. They're usually from the perspective of your average human that's aboard the ships, and they're kind of boring because, I mean, it's interesting because you can relate, right? I can't relate to superhumans, I guess, yeah. But I mean, my opinion, like, that's the star of the show. I want to read about the Primarchs. I want to read about the Legions, and I don't want to read about, the guy who's the Remembrancer Epsilon 37 and he takes pictographs. It's like, all right, man, cool. And then but again, I will say, I think it's really, you have to acknowledge that the point of those characters are to basically show you why the smallest acts have the biggest consequences. Moving on from that, though. So I am going to say a little bit about the plot without giving away too much. This book does center around the word bearers. Clearly, you can tell that from the main cover. And the Custodes do play a part in this story. There is 4 pivotal moments in this story that I think are absolutely just unbelievable, like next level. Like if you made a TV show, your mind would explode. There was parts where I was reading toward the end that I could not put this book down. I was literally finishing chapter after chapter, and I usually read this when I work out. So for me, it was like I was stopping my exercise just to read this book, and I looked super weird just sitting there on whatever machine I was on, just reading. But it was really good toward the end, and it becomes this thing where you're like, I have to know how this ends. What's really cool is you actually do get a scene with the Emperor. I'm not going to give really descriptions as to what happens yet, because I don't want to obviously spoil the book for anybody if they want to read it themselves. But of course, this is kind of the beginnings of how the word bearers fall to chaos, which I do think their decline is a little more unique. If at this point you guys don't already know, this is a spoiler, I suppose, but I mean, if you guys really haven't read this, I mean, you would have had to have not read a single book ever or not known anything about the word bearers. But Corferon, which is Logar's adopted father, and Erebus, which is Logar's, brother, but like also he was like one of the first people that were with Logar. He was always evil. They were both always involved in chaos. So was Logar's home planet. They were always into the old way. They call it the old gods, but there was a worship of chaos. But yeah, a lot of this centers around Logar's fall and how Erebus and Corferon finally got their opportunity to really start seeding betrayal, and not just the word bearers, but amongst the legions too, because they do talk about that. Now, I think if you made it this far, I'm going to give you guys my honest opinion without any more spoilers, and then we're going to switch into spoiler territory. So if I'm just saying this from an objective standpoint, this book, in my opinion, was definitely a 9 out of 10. I would recommend that you should definitely have this one if you really like. I want to read, some of the ebooks, but I want to have a couple copies of physical copies of books. This is one of the ones you should buy a physical copy of. This is a great book to read. If you don't want to know any more, cut the video off here. I'm going to go into spoilers now. Spoilers. So the main things that happen in the beginning of the first few chapters, which I loved, is the initial beginning talks about the city that they have, which they call the perfect city. This is a city that the word bearers founded and have spent a lot of time establishing compliance and getting a huge worship of the emperor on there. Well, the first few chapters kind of center around how the emperor finds out about this, and he finds out that Logar's been staying on worlds too long, and he's been trying to establish the worship of the emperor, and he's not. First of all, he hates that. But the way he responds to this with Logar, in my opinion, was so callous. It was insane. And this is actually, you can tell, this is how they actually quote this is him speaking psychically to Logar, just disregarding everything Logar's saying. But the reason this part was so crazy is that he sent Guilliman's Legion, the Ultramarines, to go and evacuate the entire city. And they're out there grabbing people. They killed a few people who were not listening. These people don't understand what's going on. They see Space Marines, but they know that they're not the word bearers. They're treating them like trash, just telling them to abandon their belongings. But I mean, the Ultramarines still did it in a way that was like kind of nice. But I mean, again, they're Space Marines, so they do what they have to, and they killed people when they started fighting back. But the painful thing is that they made these people leave their homes, cast them out to the desert, and when they were far away enough, they obliterated the city from orbit with humongous lasers. And all of this is from the perspective of one young lady who ends up becoming a very pivotal character in the book, because she witnesses the laser come down and blow up her city, and it blinds her. Moving on from that, Gilliman is there. They order all of the word bearers to come back. All the word bearers return, hearing that their city was attacked. They see all these, they see the Ultramarines fleet in orbit. They don't understand what's going on. Gilliman and Malkador, the Sigillite, are there. Logar comes down, and he's just like, "What the hell are you doing? These were loyal people. These were my people that I helped establish this place. Why are you destroying this world?" And they make all the word bearers assemble in the ashes and the bones of this city. And of course, when the Emperor arrives, it's to chastise Logar. It's to put Logar in his place, tell him to stop worshiping. This is not what he wanted him to do. He needs him to be, a weapon. And I loved this part because, and I don't think that people give Logar enough credit for this, but the conflict that Logar goes through, and especially toward the end of the book, it comes up more, where he's like, "I'm not a weapon. This is not where his strengths lie." But Logar, his character overall is so torn, because he really believed in the Emperor. He really believed in everything the Imperium was doing. And he was trying, in a way, against what the Emperor wanted, but I think in his own way, he really felt like he was doing what he was meant to do. And he wanted to do that with faith, and he wanted to do that with the faith of the Emperor, and to believe in the ideals, which I think a lot of that tied back into what the Great Crusade was supposed to be about, which is to inspire humanity to retake the stars. But again, this moment really broke Logar, because his father was standing there saying, "You failed me." And that's what really broke the Legion too at that moment, when he said, "You failed me. You and your Legion, your sons, have failed me." And the Emperor saying that to him just made him spiral out of control. And Corferon and Erebus witnessing this with him, they knew that that was their moment to just start creeping into his ear. So we're going to skip forward a little bit. Before I do that, though, real quick, one of the things that comes out of this is right after that happens, Malkador and Gilliman tell Logar that essentially squadrons of the Custodes will be accompanying his men, his fleets, to kind of watch over him to make sure what's going on. We're going to time jump a little bit. One of the main Custodes, which is Aquilion, is the one that's assigned to be with Argel Tal and his men, and he actually ends up being kind of the one closest around Logar most of the time, until he sends Argel Tal and the Serrated Sons to the Eye of Terra, toward the Cadian Gate, which is, would you find out that that's actually where they're at, because they talk about that this is the world of Cadia. It's really cool. It's a nice cool thing to find out that they discovered Cadia. They were the ones that found it. But they go there, and Aquilion and his custodians go with him, and some custodians also go with Erebus, Corferon, and Logar with the main battle fleet. Logar kind of secretly goes with Argel Tal for a while, but he doesn't go into the Eye of Terra. That happens separately. The crazy thing you find out about all the custodians that went with Corferon is that later on he's like, "Oh yeah, we killed those dudes, all of them. Like, we all just murdered them all." And I was like, "How did you kill a bunch of custodians?" But they didn't specify. They moved on. This is one of those weird books though, where they kind of they talk about how strong custodians are, but then they also kind of talk about to me, the way that they come off, the power scaling is so weird, because it's like they're these incredible fighters, but then at the same time, they're dying to space marines, and some of them are demonic powered and stuff, but it's just I don't know. And I think maybe that's the point with some of the way that they write Primarchs, and they write some of these space marines. They're supposed to be these bigger than the bigger than life fighters, but then you read the books and you're like, oh, when they're matched up against the horrors of each other and the horrors of the universe, they pale in comparison. No matter how grand of the achievements are, they may mow down 5 or 6 enemies, but they're still gonna die, because the powers that go against them are just that much stronger, or they're just that much more overwhelming. But I digress. Moving on from that, though, what I enjoyed is that the next section, a lot of this takes place over a series of a couple years. It does kind of slowly go through how Zaphon and the other chaplains go to the other legions and begin spreading the original truth, which is the primordial truth, instead of the imperial truth. The lady, the young lady who witnessed the destruction of the city, ends up becoming a very pivotal character. Her name is Serene. She becomes kind of the Blessed Lady, which is part of the almost a holy character to the Space Marines in the Serrated Suns and the ones aboard the fleet with Logar. And even Logar, talks to her and treats her with this kindness. And there's Mechanicum characters that are also super loyal to the Word Bearers. It's crazy. So many people fell to the corruption in this book, from regular soldiers to the Mechanicum units that were assigned to them, to the Space Marines themselves, and the only ones that tried to fight back against it was the Custodians in the end. But this book ends up just being such a great viewing of just how destructive the corruption is, because you have all of these people that don't totally understand what they're being pushed to do until it's right in front of them and it kills them. And I say that because the Space Marines that Logar sends into the Eye of Terra, they're willing to do it because they love him. And they love him and they believe in what he's trying to help them rebuild, which is their faith. I mean, they've lost their truth with the imperial truth. They've lost that and they don't know what to do anymore. And so, here they are being told about the primordial truth. They're trying to get their faith back. And so they trust him and they go into the Eye of Terra. And I think most of the chapter is eliminated. They die either because they die of starvation. They kill each other in some cases. Even Argol Tal dies and he gets possessed. And so does Zaphon, and then they come back to life, and it's just this conflict where they feel like they have something inside of them, and they had to kill some of their brothers to survive in order to come out of the Eye of Terra. And then Logar's you were in there for 10 seconds, dude, and it's you just went in, and then you came out, and you say it's been 3 months. But it's they still, even seeing those horrors, for some, it reinforced their beliefs. For some, it was it broke their minds. And the ones that really couldn't hack it died. And Argol Tal was wrestling with what did he go through, and then him and the Chosen, which are these possessed Space Marines that have these demonic forms and stuff to them, which they become very important later on in the story, and they get told that they're supposed to be very important. Now all of this happens because they summon a demon on Cadia that tells them that Logar needs these young men, these Space Marines that are chosen, to fight in a specific moment in time. And that is all he tells them. And that is why he must take those Space Marines into the Eye of Terra. So the demon, when they summon this demon, by the way, in order to do it, it's quite the read. But the demon is summoned from the death of multiple people on Cadia, because at this time Cadian is just a bunch of tribes, and they're all chaos worshippers. It is the death of multiple people that are basically blood sacrifices. A woman who becomes a blood sacrifice in and of herself, and her death is extremely descriptive. And then the blood of a custodian that literally goes down and witnesses, and he's this is a ritual of heresy. I'm going to kill you, Logar. And Logar was oh, okay, I figured this might happen. And then they just murder that guy. Even though he killed a couple Space Marines. He killed 2 of them, or 3 of them. And then they just overwhelmed him. And I think they broke his jaw or something. And then his mouth was gashed open, but he was still alive and fighting. And they put him on a spear and impaled him, and used his blood to summon this demon. And then the lady who was the priestess dancing, I'm telling you, the description they used, they literally say that she exploded. Her skin, for a moment, all of her organs and her skin exploded off of her. And then Argol Tal was you saw her skeleton floating in the air. And then that also exploded, and he was you could feel the bone chips flying into our armor. And I'm dude, what the heck? Could you imagine seeing that on even in animation? I'd be that would just blow my mind as a scene. I'd be what the freak did I just watch? But yeah, Ignathal is summoned, and he's this monstrous creature who reeked of disgusting sulfur. He would literally make humans throw up just by being around him, and he would corrupt their minds. I think he made one guy kill himself when he finally is around other human beings. These are just regular humans when he's around them. But yeah, he's this disgusting creature, but he tells Logar he needs to take his Space Marines into the Eye of Terra to make them into the Chosen. And He does that. Let's move on from that. Another important moment that comes up in this book is you get to see Istvan 5 again. And you get to see it from the perspective of the traitors, which I have to say was even cooler than seeing it from the perspective of the Iron Hands. Because, I mean, I'll be honest, the Iron Hands and the Salamanders and the Raven Guard, they got, they get wrecked. But, like, from the perspective of the Iron Hands, it was kind of boring. It was like, oh, okay. Then they ran in, they were, like, super hyped or whatever. This moment in here, man, is so insane. Because it's like, you almost want to cheer for the traitors. And I'm going to show you exactly what I'm going to read it to you guys so you know exactly what I'm describing. Because the way that they hype up the traitors for the betrayal, like they all know what they're going to do. And the way that they meet together is insane. Oh, and you also get a cool appearance from Sevatar, which is cool. Anytime Sevatar is in the books, he's a really cool character. He is the first captain of the Night Lords. All right. So during this time, they all meet. All of the traitor legions, and these are the ones that are pretending to be loyalists to go down and reinforce the Salamanders, the Iron Hands, and the Raven Guard. They meet together, and they basically are like, hey, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, Word Bearers, and I think also, I'm trying to remember what there's one more legion, the Alpha Legion. They meet together, and they go, we all know what we're going to do. We all know what's going to happen. And we're doing this because we have all been betrayed. And you're seeing this from their perspective on how they really feel about the Emperor and how they feel about the Imperium and what the Imperium's done to them. And so for me, I'm not going to lie, it made me actually kind of root for them because, I mean, in their minds that this is valid. This is what they needed to do. This is what had to be done. And it was crazy. It was just such a great scene. And the only way I could really describe it was almost as if you were seeing it from the same battle scene where, and I can't help but you picture Lord of the Rings, where you have essentially King Theoden, rallying the Rohirrim and telling everybody that they're all going to go in to die, you're just doing this great charge. And that's what Logar does, essentially. He goes in, right here, I found it. So they're all meeting in this room. And Logar is the one to address all of them. And he says right here, those of us in this room are under no illusions as to what we face. 8 legions of which we are 4 and countless worlds rising in rebellion against the Imperium. So they are in there saying, we all fucking know we're going to do this. And this is not going to be easy. It's just, to me, it's crazy. And what he says right here, it's just, to me, it's crazy. Like, it's crazy because you don't picture this from traitors and heretics, the damned. That's what they are. But they're basically saying, we're going to do this together. And it's like, you have all walked different paths, but together we have come to the same destination. The Emperor has failed us. The Imperium has failed us all. And then it says right here, this is where they started to kind of rally all of these traitors in that moment. That what he's saying was resonating with everyone, even the Night Lords, who are just a bunch of gang member, crazy, insane people, which I thought was really, really interesting. So he says right here, it has failed us by the laxity of its laws, the decadence of its culture, and the injustice heaped upon those of us who served most loyally. And honestly, this isn't really, I don't know if this resonated to every traitor, but definitely this resonated to the Word Bearers. You know that they felt this. And actually, to be specific, he gestured to the bare ceramite of the Iron Warriors captains. It has failed us by never recognizing our virtues, never rewarding us for the blood we have shed in bringing about its ascendancy, and never providing unity when we needed it most. So he's saying right there, I know you all feel this way. You all see the pain and the disregard the Imperium has done to our legions. And to me, it just this speech that he gives is just insane. That it's rallying these traitors to really believe in the cause that they're going in. Moving forward from there, I like that he says this part here. He says, the Emperor believes us loyal. Our 4 legions were ordered here on that misguided conviction alone. But our coalition here and now is the fruit of decades worth of planning. It was ordained and brought about according to ancient prophecy. No more hiding in the shadows, no more manipulating fleet movements and falsifying expeditionary data. From this day forward, the Alpha Legion, the Word Bearers, the Iron Warriors, and the Night Lords stand together, bloodied but unbowed beneath the flag of the War Master Horus, the second Emperor, the true Emperor. And then it said right there, all the Astartes just stared, none of them moving a muscle. The Primarch could have been addressing an army of statues. He said right there, I see, and Logar starts going into this detail, man, breaking into this, just really breaking down these Space Marines, man, making them just feel, and that's his power, that he can make people believe in what he's saying. And he goes, I see your eyes, Logar's smile took in the room. Even behind your helms, I see the hesitation, the unease, the mistrust of the very brothers by your side. We are not friends, are we? We have never been allies. Our legions are kin by bloodline, yet not brought together in chosen brotherhood. But remember this, as you look upon the shades of armor so different to your own, you are united by righteousness. You are unified in revenge. Every weapon in this room is wielded for the same cause, and that, my sons, brothers, and cousins, that is all the strength we need. After today, we will be brothers. The forge of war will see to that. Even if I wasn't a traitor, I'd be like, damn, I'm rooting for this. Okay, I understand. I would feel justified in that cause from this man's speech. And at that moment, Sevatar said the first time, and we all know what he said. If you guys are Night Lords fans, you all know he's the first one to ever utter, "Death to the false emperor." And I love that quote, because he says, "Death to the false emperor," said Sevatar, becoming the first living soul to utter the words that would echo through the millennia. The curse was taken up by other voices, and soon it would be cried in full-throated roars. Death to the false emperor, death to the false emperor, death, death, death. And just imagine a room of just thousands of Space Marines, bro, just saying that shit. And then you also had a couple Mechanicum troops there too. It just, to me, it was like, this is just fucking crazy, man. You had all these people really believing they were fighting for something true. I just can't understand that. Oh, and you also get your first, time. I don't remember if you've really... I can't think back to Conrad Kurz making an appearance until now, but he does show up in this one. And he also gets to fight, which is super fucking dope. Unbelievable. It's just an unbelievable moment. And now we jump into the next 2 parts, in my opinion. And I'm going to wrap this up pretty soon. But the next 2 parts that I think were just the absolutely best parts of this book. So moving forward, we have the initial betrayal. So you understand a little bit more from the perspective of how they set up the betrayal. Obviously, and I'm just going to kind of go off of my memory for this. Obviously, when the Salamanders, the Raven Guard, and the Iron Hands start retreating to get reinforced by the landing zones that the Iron Warriors have already set up, you first of all get an understanding of how quickly and how detailedly the Iron Warriors are able to just set up these defensive zones. But they literally wait to the moment that the Raven Guard makes it right to the battlements for the Word Bearers to just start mowing down these guys, dude. And in that moment, they betray them. You got to give props to the Raven Guard. They responded instantly. But it's really heartbreaking. So he asks, "Is this wrong? What we've done?" And Corferon, being the snake that he is, basically tells him, dude, you need to move and you need to get back into this fight. We obviously did the right thing. You're going to die if you don't, do this, start the fight. And he, of course, pushes Logar to continue fighting. You do get a glimpse of Logar's unchecked psyker power in this fight, when he actually starts, going in and killing Space Marines, and then he fights his brother, the leader, the Primarch of the Raven Guard, which is who he's also going to be fighting 10,000 years later. Wow. What is his name? 1 second, because I do not remember his name. That is unfortunate. I wish I did remember his name. Just 1 more second, guys. I'm sorry. I'm a fucking idiot. Corvus Corax. There we go. So yes, Logar fights Corvus Corax, the Primarch of the Raven Guard, who is an absolute beast in this fucking novel. Like, the guy is just mowing down Space Marines. They literally describe him killing one of the fucking possessed Space Marines by not even looking at the man. By literally just flying down and slicing him in half with his fucking razor wings. And then, without even turning to him. He doesn't even turn to him. He just fucking cuts him down and keeps fighting. He's a beast. And he's doing all that just so he can try to get as many of his men off-world as possible to try to get them to the dropships. It's pretty cool. And he fights Logar, and Logar gets absolutely fucking decimated. Because, again, Logar's not a fighter, and he knows that. He knows that Corvus is like a fucking unstoppable force. And he still tries to fight him. And he almost dies. He's literally 1 fucking hit away from dying. Corvus literally digs his fucking lightning claws into his spine, and there's a part where they talk about that his enhanced bones being what they are is the only reason that the fucking lightning claws stopped going up his guts. And then right when he was about to cut him down, Conrad stepped in. Conrad Kurz, the fucking the scary motherfucker that he is before he gets all depressed and sad later on. He shows up and fucking blocks him with his own lightning claws, and he kind of makes Corvus realize, oh, I'm wasting too much time here, and then Corvus flies away. And Conrad Kurz is a really cool line, which I picture as this fucking demented psychopath watches as his brother flies away with a jetpack, and he's, "Run, little Raven, run." It's just fucking cool, man. Such a cool scene. And then he just absolutely goes in on Logar. He's just telling him how much of a pathetic fucking loser he is. And I'm like, man, you're just bleeding on the floor. And he's like, fuck you. That's pretty cool. And finally, the last pivotal moment, in my opinion, that's really cool is, of course, when Aquilion fights Argol Tal and the rest of the possessed Space Marines. But this fight overall was really cool. It was like 3 fucking remaining Custodes, because there was 4 originally. They go and they kill the Blessed Lady with Serene. They kill her because when they find out that the betrayal happened on Istvan, they realize they've been duped the entire time by their closest friends. Aquilion had become very close with Argol Tal, and Aquilion felt very betrayed, so he purposely went after Serene, someone he knew Argol Tal cared about. And they murdered her, but of course they kind of figured that might happen, so there was the Mechanicum units waiting there to protect her. They were able to kill 1 single Custodian unit, and they just started decimating everybody on the ship. They murdered almost every single fucking normal army unit that was there. All of them were traitors at this point anyway. And the only reason the Custodians figured this all out was because, again, we went back to that human remembrancer who took the pictograph. He had shown the photo of the I want to say it was the possessed. No, it was actually a photo of the disruptions they were doing to the messages that were trying to be sent out to the fleets. So they were not getting the information they were supposed to be sending out through the psychic relay. And he showed that picture to one of the people. He showed it to an old man who was the psyker for the Ocula Impurita, which is the custodian unit assigned to watch over Logar, who then ran over to the fucking custodians and was like, hey, this is bad. We need to do something about this. And then Aquilion and the rest of them just went berserk, and they murdered everybody on the ship. And by the time the word bearers returned from Istvan to, out from the ground back to the ship, they had already kind of killed everybody, and then they had gotten into a Thunderhawk. They were flying down to the surface, but they were shot And basically, I'm assuming the Remembrancer and the old man died because they were on the ship, or either that or they ran away. I didn't get a clear understanding about that part, but I'm sure they're dead because there really isn't anywhere else you could go. And you have this last stand with the three Custodes fighting against all of the possessed Space Marines, and they manage to kill a good amount of them before the first Custodes dies. And he gets bit in the neck, I believe, and he gets bit through the back, so he gets ripped apart in that section. And as he's dying, he killed two of those Marines before he died. And what's pretty interesting is that, like, essentially, as one Custodes dies, the other one takes the opportunity to kill the ones that are killing that one. And then the last one being Argol killing Aquilion himself, actually going at him, because Aquilion kills the Space Marines that were killing his brother, the Custodian, and Argol took this opportunity to go. I'm sorry about that. Argol took this opportunity to go in and essentially stab at Aquilion. Well, he didn't really so much stab as he used his serrated, teeth that he has now as part of his possessed form to bite his head and literally rip it off with the spine still attached off of the guy's body, which is pretty crazy considering that was someone you called your brother. But I mean, what a way to murder the man. And the last remaining Custodian, which is the one who was with a vow of silence, he'd had that vow of silence since he left Terra. He realizes that he's pretty much outnumbered. It's just him. He's a master swordsman. He chucks his spear and aims it straight for one specific Space Marine that he always had problems with. And it's so funny because he finally breaks his vow of silence when he gets him. And he gets that Space Marine dead center, impales that man, and then just lets himself get killed with the remaining two possessed that charge at him. And he basically was like, you know what, if I'm going to die, I'm going to kill Zaphon. And he kills Zaphon. He purposely takes Zaphon out. But I think, as funny as that is, it's like such a pivotal scene because it's like Argol is pretty much alone. And in that moment, at the end of the book, he's like thinking, his brother, Aquilion, is dead. Space Marines from the Serrated Suns are all but gone. Zaphon, his closest friend, is dead. And the only person he has left is the demon, Rom, who tells him, I am your brother now. Like, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Because they have formed a symbiosis, the two of them, and they have achieved what so many of the other possessed probably won't be able to achieve, which is a mutual level of cooperation with the demon, essentially. Some of them will get like a level of it, but never to probably the same level as Argol. And I am curious to see how the rest of his story pans out in the overall heresy, Hey guys, make sure you drop a comment on what you thought about this video, like, subscribe, and check me out on TikTok at JackSkellington117.